Welcome to the AI briefing from the Institute. Here's everything you need to know from the last 24 hours. And believe me, it has been a busy one, so let's jump right in.
Okay, we're going to start with the number that just perfectly captures AI's real-world impact right now. 50. That's how many U.S. states, plus Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and D.C., are actually considering AI legislation in 2025. I mean, think about that. Not some, not most, all of them. This whole conversation has officially left Silicon Valley and landed in every single state house across the country.
And this quote from the National Conference of State Legislatures, it just frames the challenge perfectly. This isn't some simple, straightforward issue. It's a massive balancing act, between pushing for incredible innovation, creating the guardrails we're going to need, and of course, serving the public good. This tension right here, this is what's driving that entire legislative push.
So, our first theme today is crystal clear. AI is firmly on the agenda. This is no longer some niche topic for a tech subcommittee. It is a frontline issue for lawmakers everywhere. Let's take a look at what they're really focused on.
The legislative hotspots are pretty much exactly where you'd expect them to be. There is a huge push to regulate deepfakes, especially with elections in mind. There's intense scrutiny on how governments themselves are using AI. We're seeing new rules pop up for the private sector, all around transparency. And of course, the big ones, AI's impact on jobs and its use by law enforcement are still major battlegrounds. Policy is in a full-on sprint, just trying to keep up.
All right, now let's pivot. We're going from the world of policy to the absolute cutting edge of research, where a new paper is challenging a core assumption of the entire industry. It's the story of a tiny model that's thinking like an absolute giant.
And this comparison just says it all. For years, the paradigm has been bigger is better, right? Just pile on more parameters, throw more data at it. But Samsung's new tiny recursive model, or TRM, it just flips that whole idea on its head. Get this, it has just 7 million parameters, which is a tiny, tiny fraction of a big model. And it uses a completely different method, recursive self-correction.
So how in the world does this thing work? Well, instead of just generating an answer token by token and kind of hoping it doesn't mess up, the TRM essentially thinks, rethinks, and then thinks again. It cycles through the problem, refining its own internal reasoning and its answer along the way. It progressively corrects itself. So it's less about having all the knowledge up front and more about having a really powerful process for finding the right answer. And here's the wild result. On the ARC-AGI-2 benchmark, which is a notoriously difficult test of fluid intelligence, the tiny 7 million parameter TRM doesn't just compete, it actually beats Gemini 2.5 Pro. Now this is a huge deal. It suggests that just raw scale might not be the only path to more capable AI after all.
Okay, now let's zoom out a bit to the broader research landscape. That whole idea of smarter, not bigger from the Samsung paper, it's not an anomaly. It is absolutely part of a much bigger story about how AI agents are evolving.
The biggest trend we're seeing in the latest research is this major push for more autonomy. AI agents are basically graduating from following simple one-off instructions to executing these complex, hours-long missions in environments that are constantly changing and totally unpredictable.
And here are just a few examples from papers published in just the last 24 hours. We have one agent, Lumine, that can play through the entire 5-hour storyline of a complex 3D game. Another one, Har, gives agents a kind of short-term memory so they stop repeating the same mistakes. We're also seeing vision language models that don't just see the world but actively reason about it. And world models like WMPO actually let robots learn from imagined failures before they ever happen in the real world.
But it's not just about individual intelligence, which is fascinating enough. What's also happening is that these smarter agents are now learning to work together in completely new ways.
Researchers are practically reinventing communication itself. There's a new paper on Intralat that proposes agents communicate directly through their internal thoughts, completely bypassing language. At the same time, work on something called Sage Agent is making human-agent interaction way smarter by teaching agents to ask for clarification when our instructions are a little vague.
Of course, as agents get smarter and more autonomous, a critical question follows. How do we make sure they're safe and actually aligned with our goals? And that brings us to the other side of the coin, the accelerating research into AI alignment.
A huge focus here is on defense. You see, with more capable models comes a much larger attack surface.
So a massive amount of the latest alignment research is all about hardening these systems against manipulation and adversarial attacks like prompt injection.
And this is playing out in a few ways. Researchers are now theoretically mapping out the vulnerabilities in our core alignment techniques like reinforcement learning from human feedback. New defenses like second-infer are being developed that work at inference time, so after the model is already trained. And there are these really clever frameworks that are teaching models how to reason about conflicting instructions so they can follow a clear hierarchy of rules.
Beyond just pure defense, alignment research is also digging deep into the quality of the model's thought process itself. I mean, it's not enough for a model to just get the right answer. We need to make sure its reasoning is efficient, sound, and free from logical errors or hallucinations.
And the latest research has some really ingenious solutions here. Conciseness reward models are being used to stop models from overthinking and just wasting compute cycles. A new paper on causal reasoning actually trains models to build causal graphs to stop them from making these crazy logical leaps. And new reinforcement learning methods like TBRM are simplifying the whole process of training models to reason well, making it much more efficient and stable. So finally, let's pull all the way back and connect all these technical threats, from policy to tiny models to alignment, to the really big picture. Because these breakthroughs, they aren't just about code. They're raising fundamental questions about the future that we're all building together.
There's this provocative new opinion paper that introduces a concept called model raising. And the idea is to shift from our current approach, where we train a model and then try to align it afterwards, to a totally new paradigm. One where we weave values and identity into the model from the very first training token, treating its data not as just some static library, but as a form of lived experience.
And really, this is the core takeaway from today's briefing. Every single technical choice we've talked about, the way we teach an agent to navigate, the method we use to make its reasoning more concise, the data we choose to train it on, none of that is just a technical decision. It's a value judgment that gets baked right into the foundation of these systems. Which leaves us with this one last question. We are getting incredibly good at teaching these models what to know and what to do, but are we spending enough time thinking about who, or even what, we want them to ultimately become? That's the challenge that's going to define the next era of AI.